The Polsky Practical Personal Enrichment Series is underwritten by the Polsky Family Supporting Foundation in partnership with the Johnson County Community College Foundation, which seeks to educate and empower the public in the areas of health, financial independence, and topical issues not covered elsewhere.
So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Polsky Practical Personal Enrichment Series. We are proud to bring you this special presentation, Perennials from Around the World, How New Plants Are Found, featuring Dan Heims, who's here, president of Terra Nova Nurseries. Dan is a nationally known writer and photographer who is about to take us on a whirlwind tour of 10 horticultural countries. He's appearing here as part of JCCC's Horticultural Sciences Field Day, and we are thrilled he's part of the Polsky series tonight as well. For those of you who are frequent attendees of the Polsky series throughout the year, you will notice that we are doing something a little different this time, having a lecture here in the Hudson Auditorium rather than in the Carlson Center's Polsky Theater. We did that for our December lecture on architecture, and it was a success, so we thought we'd try it again. We will return to Polsky Theater in the future, but we are happy to have as many venues as possible here at JCCC, where we can welcome our Polsky series audiences. For some of you, this may be your first visit to the museum. Welcome. The galleries are open tonight until 9 o'clock, so if you have a moment after the lecture to walk through a few of our spaces, please do so. You Polsky series regulars might notice something else different tonight as well. I am not Emily Berman. As many of you know, Emily usually MCs the Polsky series lectures, and she has a very good voice as well. My name is Lekha Sridhar, and I'm Associate Professor and Chair of the Horticultural Sciences Department here at Johnson County Community College. I also want to give a very big thank you to the Polsky family. The Polsky series is made possible by the Norman and Elaine Polsky Family Supporting Foundation within the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation. The series is in partnership with JCCC and includes topics not currently offered elsewhere. You can read more about Norm and Elaine in the booklets you have. You all have a booklet with you. We are indeed honored to have the Polsky family members here. Okay, at the back, extreme back, we have, I think we have Larry and Ellen Polsky. Okay, Larry Silva and Renee Silva Polsky. We have 4 seats reserved for them, so they're at the back there. Thank you for coming today. We're indeed honored to have you today. We have an excellent horticultural sciences program as well. Since I'm the chair, I might as well talk a little bit about my program as well. More information can be obtained from the program brochures we have at the back of the room today. And of course, this morning, we had the 3rd annual JCCC Horticultural Sciences Field Day at RC 101, the next building. It was a huge success. We had more than 250 people attend. We had, throughout the day, we had several leading experts from academia and industry give talks on topics relevant to tomorrow's horticulturist. And topics range from pollinator protection issues and gardening with native plants to bioplastics and reducing the carbon footprint. And like I said, it was a huge success, and we'll have it again next year. Might be the day after Valentine's Day again. Hope to see you all, at least some of you there next year. And I have some people to thank for helping to make this event possible today. Of course, our JCCC horticulture students, the Student Sustainability Committee, they are also a big group. Dr. Jason Kovac and Julie Haas, and of course, Christy McWatt, who's at the back of the room here. Thank you, Christy. Now, before I introduce our speaker, I want to let you know that we will have a time for moderated question and answer session after the presentation. I invite you to think of questions and write them on the blue cards. You have 2 cards with you, one blue, one green. So on the blue cards, please write your questions. And our staff will come around and pick those up, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible. We also have green cards in your booklets. That is so that we can add you to our email list or mailing list and inform you of other special Polsky series events. We also love to hear your ideas. So if there is a topic or a speaker you'd like to hear, please let us know on that green card you have. So you have 2 cards, one blue, one green. Please hand in both the cards back, okay? One with your question, one with your ideas, okay? It's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Dan Heims. Dan came all the way from Portland, Oregon. Dan Heims has been involved in every facet of horticulture. He has traveled to 23 countries. I should stress that. That's a lot of countries to visit. So he has traveled to 23 countries in search of the next new plant. Dan has taught horticulture, wholesale tropicals, and run his own design and built a landscape company. He is president of Terra Nova Nurseries, one of the largest perennial nurseries in the United States. It's also a revolutionary company, in Dan's words, guilty of introducing over 700 new plants to horticulture. His articles and photography have been seen in many newspapers and magazines. He has written 2 books, and I think he has the books with him today, and he has a 3rd in the works. He has hosted a show on KKSN radio and has been on HGTV, BBC, and of course, Martha Stewart. Now let's give a warm Kansas City welcome to Dan Heims. Thank you all.
Hello. My name is Dan Heims, and I'm a hortaholic. Not one person says, hi, Dan. Okay, I always judge my crowds. And I am the only person in the museum who gets to drink a cup of coffee. Excuse me, I'm going to savor this moment. I want to dedicate my lecture to what I call my second family when I was growing up. And you're going to hear me cracking up. The Polsons in the front row here were the parents of my very best friend, Steve. And their house was always open to me. Do you mind my sharing? Steve took his own life, and I had no closure. And they disappeared. I could not find a single family member. Everything was lost, so I had no closure. Bobby, Steve's little brother, where does he settle? Overland Park, Kansas. So this is for you. I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm going to make you sick. We are 7B, which means we can grow anything. There are gingers we can grow in the ground. You're seeing my garden. I love my garden. Let's bring those lights down a little bit. You know what I look like now. I have over 1,800 different plants in my garden. It is a botanical garden of its own, right? It has a 33-foot drop. Now, can you imagine being a landscape designer in Oregon, having those choices? I mean, plants from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and they all grow there. Here, it's easy. Y'all like hostas? I have a Japanese maple arboretum in my own garden. I have 65 different Japanese maples. And this is my forest. You can see the trunks on some of these. You see that one? That's over 35 feet tall. These all started as 1-gallon plants. I've trained them. I've pruned every single branch, and I love my garden. In the spring, you look up through the leaves, and it's like you're in a cathedral with stained glass. It's beautiful. Come fall, the glass just brightens. And having so many different varieties. I love my garden. As I said, there's so many places in the world where plants grow that are compatible with us. And as part of my business, I have to find, that's my job description, find new plants. Travel the world. It's tough, but somebody has to do it. So 33 countries. I've learned some languages. Actually, Tom was one of my inspirations. He spoke Russian, taught at Portland State University, and I am of Russian heritage, and I took 3 years of Russian in high school. I've since learned Spanish, Japanese, and it's opened up doorways. If I had one dream in my life, it would be to know every language, to be able to communicate with everybody in the world. And mark my word, in 3 years, we will have a Google app that's spontaneous. We're almost there. That is spontaneous, and it can listen and speak for us. This is what I do. 700 new plants to horticulture. My goal in life, 801. Does anybody know why this is significant? Anybody? This is a test. It's a Babe Ruth of the botanical world. Luther Burbank introduced 800 plants to horticulture, and I gotta beat them by 1. Where do we find plants? That might even be one of the better names of this talk. And there's a town across the river from us called Camas, Washington. It's a bit hard to see here. You might see it from the back. But this is a field of camas lilies. It's growing on about 6 inches of soil. That's it. The rest is just rock. It dries up bone dry by late May. Nothing. But you get this beautiful, this is like in March. These are so early. But dead center is a plant with white flowers. It's a genetic mutation, and it's what one looks for. This is Peter, who is visiting from Sweden. Heucheras were selected as the Sweden's plant of the year. So he came over and filmed. And Diana Reek, one of my hiking buddies, naturalist friend, and she's holding the typical flower of this plant, balsam root, Balsam oryza sagittifolia. You are going to be tested. And this is a 12-inch wide mutation we found along the road. It was on Indian reservation land. We could not dig it up. I don't do that. And it's lost. We never could find it again. But it's what you find. Mutations occur in nature. Hybrids occur in nature. Have we been on this bus? You need to get off your high knees. The internet is wonderful, but there is nothing like experiencing gardens. This was at Mount Cuba Center. It's a huge native plant study center, and what a beautiful display they do. This is our gardens at Terra Nova. We open it up one day a year. If you're the public, that's it. If you come to Portland, unless you're a Polson, you get a free tour. Come to Portland, you may go through our gardens for $25 a head, payable to the Master Gardeners of Oregon, since they lost all their funding. And it's probably our biggest advertisement, and it is just loaded with plants. I'm into design, I'm into color, I'm into texture, color echoes. You see it all here. Trade shows, Chelsea Flower Show. How many people have been to Chelsea? I see one wee hand in the back. Never. It is perfection. It is the perfection of horticulture. In my mind, there are two meccas, England and Japan. And of course, they will be on our list today. We've lived here, right? You always push the envelope, and how nice it was that they changed the USDA hardiness so you can grow so many more new plants. No, climate change is real. It isn't. It's a happening thing, and it's fun. It's fun to see new varieties. Commercial trade shows. This is the, I was given a very high honor for an English organizational like the Horticultural Trades Association to invite me as a speaker and as a judge for new plants. This was just last year. And we are going through the table. I have people from the Royal Horticultural Society, I mean top judges with me. And we are bantering back and forth. And even though this plant is not mine, we are debating its merits. And we end up with 5 of the top plants for the show. And that was just a kick in the pants. I loved that. And this is the, what was this? This is the 4 Oak show. And I showed this slide in my earlier talk, but this is the how plants are launched in England. Huge poster, the bullet points. What's outstanding about that plant? The live plants. Is this just a BS picture or is this the real thing? I mean, come on. You've seen catalogs. And that's how they're launched. Where can you find a plant? It might be in your own backyard. This is a toad lily, a tricertus. This is just a single pot I had. And this one plant that I picked up in Japan, which originally looked like this, gave 1, 2, 3, 4 different varieties. Just mutations. You'll see hostas doing this all the time. If you ever grew gold standard, that was amazing for that. I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the breeding of plants and people. This is a pulmonaria. Remember when I brought that up to that previous group? That a breeder has to approach a plant by its problems, right? And I mentioned pulmonaria. And how long did it take for people to respond? Mildew. #1 problem. How long did it take? 1 second. Boom. Worst thing about this plant. People come to me and say, well, I have this pulmonaria. This is just coated with mildew. Notice how the flowers are pointing? Everywhere but at you. That's horrible. I think that's just as bad as the mildew. So my job as a breeder is to fix this plant, okay? So yeah, they'd come to me and say, what do I spray on this pulmonaria? It's just covered with mildew. And I say, do you know what glyphosate is? Otherwise known as Roundup. Like my aviator glasses, this is an earlier picture. But hybridizing is where it's at, and it requires unbelievable numbers of seedlings. Honestly, we do no less than 200,000 seedlings a year to select perhaps 12 new plants. But those 12 plants are something else. Here we're doing a flowering trial on Heuchera. Some of these had 36-inch tall flowers. And we show these to people in the industry, and we get no response. I was so sick and frustrated. This was the tallest flower, beautiful plants, green leaves, but what a show, and the flowers last the longest time. And I just said, just plow them under. I don't even want to see them again. That's it. Forget it. John Gatos, who's one of the, you maybe heard him speak from the Proven Winners group, came up to me 6 months later and said, Dan, we're thinking of introducing a new line of plants like Heucheras with flowers that you could use as cuts. I wasn't pleased. You couldn't see my smile I had. But this is giving you an idea of just the sheer number of seedlings. And with the pulmonaria, I would take that ugly mildewed plant, spray water over every single one here, and ruthlessly dig out every single one that got mildew. And we'd only have a few at the end of this trial. The next year, 50% were clean. The next year, so there's a whole new generation every year. The next year, 80% were clean. And right now, it's about 95%. So we are literally breeding that susceptibility out of that plant. And then you look at these. Remember I said how I hated the flowers that pointed away from you? Look at that. It looks like a chicken that got dropped off a building. And they're pointing every which way. And then I see the one. Everybody see that? Pulmonaria baby blue. And it gets introduced. It looks at you, zero mildew, a new plant is born. Once you have the plant, we then go through this whole process of cleaning the plant. We have them virus indexed. If there is one spore of bacteria, if there is one fungus spore, they cannot be grown in tissue culture. They have to be absolutely clean. A clean plant is a healthy plant. And through the tissue culture process, we can increase these up to 1 million plants from a single, called an apical meristem. It's like a stem cell for plants. It can grow into roots or shoots. And that's half the size of a grain of rice, even if it's a 120-foot tall bamboo. They're grown in the greenhouse, adapted to the soil, and this is what goes out the door. So we are really low on the food chain, which is really a good place to be. So a nursery in town here would be bringing in the plugs, growing them up to gallon pots, and off they go into your gardens. Does this look exotic? We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. This is, was it Pukei'iti Gardens? Yes. I tend not to use notes, so bear with me. One of the more amazing gardens in New Zealand. It's not far from Plymouth. There's a, in this garden, there's rhododendrons that are close to 100 years old that have 12-inch trunks on them. They're like trees. There's rata trees, which is a native tree, up to 4,000 years old on this property. Felix Jury, who owns the gardens, he's gone now. His son Mark is continuing the breeding, does a lot of work with camellias and magnolias. Felix is best known for his magnolias. In his garden, he had bromeliads in the trees, you know, the air plants. In the ground, he had hostas. Do you know how impossible that is? which means that over 30 years, the frost would only crawl along the ground enough to give the hostas the chill, but the air was warm enough to keep those bromeliads. You think we have it good in Oregon? Whoa. If you've ever seen, this is a Zone 2 maple called ESK Sunset, and this is the first time I ever saw it. I mean, I could see it from 300 feet away. It is one dynamic plant. But it's a type of pseudoplatanus maple. Armerias, absolutely hardy, and you folks use salt on the roads here? Okay, there are times you want to have plants where salt may be hitting. This one's entirely salt-proof. So that's a good one. Armeria, nifty, thrifty. When I go to these different countries, I always do my research, and I find who are the breeders. And in this case, it was Keith Hammett. And Keith is he's a character for starters, most of us are. And Keith was showing some of his plants. And this is a few years ago. And he had this black, this is a dahlia. I mean, it was midnight black. We've seen the Bishop of Landolph. Now that's kind of a reddy brown. That's been out there. This was black. And look at that flower for contrast. How many people think that's a great plant? Okay. I was complimenting Keith on it. He says, "Oh, Dan, don't you know anything about plants? That's a piece of crap." He says, and I said, "Really? Why?" He says, "Oh, the flowers in the uppermost part of the plant. There's nothing to break up the foliage. Foliage is a bit too bold, and the flower's much too small. It's out of proportion with the foliage." This is the eye that a breeder needs to know that a plant is astounding. But he wanted to give us a peek, which I appreciate. This is a plant in the borage family, actually related to Pulmonaria, called Echium, or Echium. And Terry Hatch, who happens to be a hellebore breeder, a friend of mine down there, who is never out of shorts any day. But these are easily 16 feet tall. And he was working on isolating the colors, anything from pink to blue. Not Kansas hardy. This is called a Table, was it Table Mountain? Cradle Mountain. Table Mountain. And this is a wonderful, if you're familiar with how tall these seleniums can get, you know, a lot of them are typically 7, 8 feet tall, quite compact. This was a breakthrough. This is what I am looking for as a breeder. See something entirely new. This was the landscape at Cradle Mountain. It was the Australia Institute of Horticulture called me up and they said, "Dan, we're hoping you can come and speak to us. We'd like to have you do 3 talks. We'll fly you here, we'll put you up, we'll take you out in the bush and have you do a bit of exploring. We'll be at your beck and call, but we can't afford your lecture fee. Will you consider it?" And I said, "Oh, I have to think about this." Yes. And it was amazing. This is actually in Tassie, or Tasmania. And this was quite an experience, and we stayed in a rather rustic cabin. How many people saw the wallaby here? Yeah. These Rhychia are, this is an area that gets snow every year. You'll see little patches of snow here and there. But I found hundreds of plants that'd be hardy in Oregon. Eucalyptus, crazy stuff. And the wallabies, every one of these marsupials is alpine. So they're used to these freezing wet temperatures, and they have the most beautiful coats of fur. They just look like minks. And this English woman, and they're quite tame actually for being wild animals. This English woman was eating an apple and she said, "Oh, I wonder if I could give this to this wallaby." And she came right up to it. And it just almost bit her finger off. It was disgusting. But that's at Reickia. So I'm looking to bring this one back. I think I've found a seed source finally. That was the little guy who bit her finger. Very proud of his tail. And the rule of the jungle, I have to watch my time, the rule of the jungle in Tasmania is the largest animal wins. And they're nocturnal. So we're driving in at night to this cabin. You're the largest animal on the road, and you are the pack leader. And they will follow you as fast as you can go. And we had wallabies, wombats, almost 5 feet long, potoroos, which are little miniature kangaroos. I mean, just this oddest group. And one of the ways they check into each other is sort of bump into each other. And what happens when you bump into cars? Yeah, I won't go into it, but it was sad. We lost a little soldier. Going to Australia, and I don't know why this concept isn't practiced in the United States. This is in Melbourne, and they have, okay, this is stand, Shirley's had stand 26. They had 35 different stands. Each nursery is responsible for restocking. Landscapers, designers would come in, buy the plants, or put them on the cart. Everyone had a tag, and they knew, who to pay. And you could buy your landscape stone, you could buy your mulches, pots, everything. Supplies, fertilizers, everything was in this huge landscape center. But what a boon it was to me to see virtually every single plant that was being grown in Australia at the time. Katie's blush. Variegated eucalyptus. I've never seen one of these in my life. I've seen a lot of plants. I have seen probably 1 million different plants in my lifetime. Never seen one of these. Can you propagate it? No. If you're lucky, you'll get a seedling every now and then. But this guy, this was in, not Melbourne, up in Sydney. Absolutely variegated plant, crazy. Every single plant in the garden was variegated. I mean, I consider myself an authority because I'm personally variegated, but it was an astounding garden, and then nothing blew me away more than this Tetrapanax, 3-foot wide leaves. It was a stunner. It had 2 shoots, 35 years old, actually this one was. 2 shoots. And he said, "How can I increase it?" I said, "Can I get a cutting if I do?" The story continues. Japan is another home for me. I am comfortable with everything but sitting down in Japan. The language is actually fairly simple. There's not a lot of verb declension. There's no he, she, or it. It's very straightforward. It's just a different, alphabet writing, no way. Within a year or two, you will have your iPad app. I've got one right now that you point at anything Spanish, Italian, or German, it will translate it on the fly, and as you're viewing it, translate it. That's pretty darn cool. They'll have this for Japanese before you know it. This is Kyoto. If you were to go to any city in Japan, if you were to go to one city, go to Kyoto. Anybody been? Is it amazing? Yeah. 1,700 shrines in the city. A lot of them have the most beautiful Japanese gardens you have ever seen. This is Kiyomitsu, and this is the Kinkaku. Hosta people would know this because there's a hosta called Kinkaku, the Golden Pavilion. Behind that area were miles of Japanese maples. That's the native tree there. This is typical, we're getting up into the mountains of Japan, cryptomeria forests. This is the timber bamboo. These are 120 feet tall. They are stunning. They make scaffolding out of these, ladders. The rice paddies, anywhere it's wet and flat and low, there are rice paddies. If they want fruit trees, they build them up. And at $10 an apple, they have bird netting over everything. It's pretty cool. These are $1 million homes here. Boom, 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 all the way along. These mountains are so steep, so new, kind of like your Kansas mountains. They are so steep, you can't grow people on them. I mean, they're just, you can't grow crops on them. You can grow trees. There are a few forest plants that they'll use for food. This is my sensei. This is Sensei Yokoi, and he is one of the most respected men in Japan. He was a horticulture professor at Chiba University, and anytime I go, he is my first stop. He is getting close to 90, and it's really scary to think if I can ever go again. I've been there 6 times. First time I went, it was a major collection period. I brought back over 500 plants. It used to be easy to bring plants back. In my description, I said, how can you bring plants back legally? Write this down if you are really interested in doing it. Well, let me see, is anybody interested in bringing plants from a foreign country? If there's nobody here, okay. All I needed was a couple. Google USDA APHIS, that's for real, APHIS, and plant import permit. And up will come the forms that you need to be able to bring plants into this country. You will go to a state office, they will check your nursery and make sure you have the facilities to show them the plants after you brought them in. You then go to the country. In Narita Airport, for example, there is a Japanese agriculture and fisheries office where you would bring the washed plants to. They spend hours and hours poring over your plants. You've given them the scientific names. If it is not endangered, if it is not invasive, they might okay it. And they give you their phytosanitary certificate. It's about $150, okay? You come with the certificate and the plants to an American airport, and you've seen agriculture, get over there. Anybody who had that apple they were trying to smuggle has been there. They will look at the phyto. They'll look at your plant list. They'll compare it to the CITES list, the invasive list. They'll go, okay, these are in order. They'll throw it away. They say it's our turn to check the plants out. If all goes well, and you give them your FedEx number, a third-party billing number, the plants will make it to you. I will have you know that I spent 30 days, over $1,000, to bring a 2-pound box, and I'm a professional, to bring a 2-pound box in from England. Everything was straight except that I had gone to multiple nurseries, and each one had not been checked for this nematode that lives only in the soil, not in potting soil, but it didn't have that additional permit, and they burned it. I cried. It was sad. Japanese nurseries are amazing. I can go to an American nursery and see 1 or 2 plants maybe that I haven't seen before. There can literally be hundreds in these nurseries. It'll just blow your mind. The specialization, I mentioned this one in my earlier talk. This young man here, this is his whole nursery. It's this one cage. And all he sells are wild collected variegated forms of Hosta rectifolia at the price of $2,500 a piece. He makes 6 figures. That's it. He has a little table he sets at the base of the trail at the mountain. And people, that's something they do. That's a hobby, is to look for these rare plants. This is a tree peony. You may have heard the name Barry Yinger. He was the man who pretty much conquered Japan before me. And invariably, everywhere I went in Japan, I just say, I have to have this plant. And they go, oh, no, 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 no. Barry Yinger come here last week. He said, no, only for him. Frustrating. Caryopteris, snow fairy, wonderful plant, full sun. Anybody grow this here? All right. Great plant, full sun, and great variegated foliage. Flowers not too much. It's about 3 feet tall for us. How tall here? 2.5, okay. That's 6 inches for our extra rain. But really, it should be in everybody's garden because it's just so bright. This I found in Japan. It is a variegated, purple-leafed, fragrant, evergreen hydrangea. Can you believe that? Now, it's not really hardy. It'd live in Oregon. That's it. So that was I couldn't even fit it on the line. Hostas. Who has seen this hosta? A mime. It's one of the rectifolia varieties, by the way. Is that crazy variegation? What is it? It's a variegated ginger. I went to nurseries that only sold variegated gingers. And these start at $35. They go up to in the thousands. I went to one small nursery. A Toyota executive came in. This guy, the executive, he's like one of the vice presidents. And he found a plant that he had to have. And the guy just said, no, I'm not selling it, I'm not selling it. And the guy said, okay, I make you a deal. I give you a new car. And the guy said, yes, okay. You twisted my arm. We are in China now. China is the home. It is such a gigantic country and home to so many time zones, climate zones, that there is a Kansas equivalent in China. There are Zone 3 areas in China, Zone 2, Zone 7, tropical areas. So my joy, my lifetime ambition was to get into these exotic places and be the only white boy and see what I could do to find some new plant material. There, went to a florist market at 4 a.m. in the morning, and this was $9 with the pot. So there were shops all the way around there. Primitive is all I can say, is their nursery culture. They didn't even have pots. They would just pretty much ball and burlap or whatever plastic bags they could find. They'd dig these trees up. There was some, this is a trade show that was in China, and one of the translators in the back there, and they're taking pictures of me. As I got right where his foot was, the bridge went, and it started falling in, and I just jumped out. The guy pulled my arm, and I got out, and everybody else had to walk the long way. That was scary. But it's also, it has its primitive side, and of course it has its very modern side. I would find these at the trade show, tissue culture plants. Huge TC labs doing 20 million plants a year, including orchids. This is, so that was 2005 I went there. World Horti Expo Garden in Kunming, China. This is in Yunnan, where I visited the Botanic Garden, and they had this huge show garden. It's one of those areas, what's that one in Mexico? They call it the land of eternal spring. Anybody ever been there in Mexico? But the temperature never gets below 30 and never above 75. Spring, year-round. And this was just fun to see. It was like a World's Fair, and they were selling all over China, all the different provinces that have great displays with jewelry and trinkets. I mean, really, quality stuff. This is the, I actually learned the Chinese name of the monkey there, and it's, maybe we can all say it together. Angela Jolie. Okay. I've had my fun. The mountains are magnificent. This is a Corydalis or Corydalis called Wilsonii, which came from there. Powder blue foliage, zone 4 hardy. You have to have like rock garden conditions to grow this. Anybody know what rock garden conditions are? Who knows what you have to have for a rock garden? Who said that? Say it out loud.
Excellent drainage.
Right. You can't have peat in the soil. You can't have any clay. Sometimes it's nothing but gravel. They call it a scree garden. That was Corydalis alata, which is a fragrant blue. That would actually probably live down here. Podophyllum. Crazy cool plants. These are up to 18 inches across. In the barberry family. They're wild. And that's the flower. That's another species, but flowers under the foliage. This would be a hardy fern here. It's also evergreen. Now with your wind, I don't think it'd be evergreen. You'd have to have it in a protected spot or around the rocks. This is an adiantum. It's a maidenhair, Adiantum venistum. And the new foliage is orangey red. It's slow, but a very, very worthwhile plant to grow. Erasemas. Anybody grow erasemas here? Okay, which one do you grow? In the back?
I got it from Tony Avery years ago, and they made it so I don't know.
How tall are they? Okay, he was showing about 2 feet tall. These are in the philodendron family, yet they adapted to grow in the Himalayas and very cold areas. If you can live in Kansas, but this is one called Taiwanense. And this is a new thalictrum. This is a zone 4 thalictrum called Ichengensi, evening star. I want to see how she signs Ichengensi. Oh, phonetically. And, but beautiful, very dwarf plant. Blooms for 3 or 4 months. Quite cool. My travels, we're just going to be hopping around the world right now. This is in Germany. And this is in the, if you've ever got astilbes and you heard of the Arenzii hybrids, this is Arendt's nursery. It's one of the few continuously operational nurseries since the turn of the century. And George Arends, his granddaughter, Anya, is running this nursery right now. And she has a landscape, landscape company and design, and they have a nursery on the premises, which is still, it's not far from Dusseldorf. And this is a Gertrude Jekyll inspired garden they had there. And the plant I'm showing is, which I got in Germany, is called Persicaria polymorpha. Anybody grow that here? What's that? not that one. But just stunning white flowers, absolutely sterile, does not run. But the beauty of this kind of garden is that there is something in bloom almost any time of the year. And that's way cool. And Spagos, the father of modern grasses. If you have a miscanthus in your garden, this is the man to thank. Unbelievable. Breeder of plants, spoke maybe 3 words of English. I stayed at his house, and we spent hours comparing pictures. And if you're a plants person, that's why I love plant people. You don't need English. Latin works. Got this over there from a Heims nursery called Purple Torch. I do not know why this isn't in the industry more. Those can be up to 12 inches long for an ajuga to have spikes like that. Eryngium blaukappa, blue hat. Stunner. Great cut flower, great dried flower. Hardy. This is from Darwin Plants. Let's see, this is Gold Rush, or Gold Rush. And it's one of the first of the Shasta daisies to have a bit of gold in it. Stachys, a really fine selection. I think that was at Poggles. And of course, the Essen show, it's inspirational. It is, the whole show is probably the size of this campus. Acres and acres and acres and acres. It takes 3 days just to walk the show if you're going to interact with people at another day. It's a 4-day show. I've never been to anything so big in my life, and they do it big time. I mean, people spend $200,000 on a booth. It's big money. That's in Essen, Germany. This is for the girls, or maybe some of the guys. It's very interesting. But you pick up some fun. Any florists in the group? Here's one in the front. Is that fun? Those are aspidistra leaves, cast iron plant. Let's have fun. They have their new plant trials. Everything is judged. This was a lavender, and one of the winners. Nice variegated form. In Japan, I saw the work of a great breeder named Ozawa, who during the 1960s developed what is called a determinate clematis. You've seen patio tomatoes. You know what determinate means. Gets up to a certain height, makes fruit. This gets up to a certain height and flowers. So the Evison clematis, these are from Polson roses. Hey! Any relation? Darn. Okay. But how nice to have something that'll bloom in a gallon pot. That's an azalea. Saw this at that trade show. Unbelievable. They look like plastic. It blooms for months. How about a black azalea? Purpelkissen, purple kisses. I like the name. I have a Dutch friend named Peter van Rijsen from a company called Plant Tip, and he goes, Dan, I'm so happy to see you. Come. I have to show you this newest stilby. It's a blue one. And I said, I've never heard of a blue one. And he's literally grabbing my hand, dragging me through the show to show me this plant. I said, Peter, did you even look at the tag? He says, no, I'm too excited. And it says, died. That didn't work. And these are clovers, which I actually first saw in Japan, but they're just starting to introduce them over in Europe right now. clovers are hardy. And look at the cool foliage forms. So those are some new plants to look for. This is from a hellebore breeder named Heucher. There's a lot of horticulture going into Germany. They're probably number 3, which is why I'm showing you all these countries. But this is a hybrid that's never been done before. Niger, which is, and I'll use the Japanese name, Helleborus niger in Japanese is a Christmas rose, Christmas rose, and crossed with a purple flowered form. Brand new. This is just last year. Hot off the press. Okay, how many people have been to Holland? All right. Been to Kokenhof? To the tulips? And anybody seen that show? It's astounding. And this is, if you're just driving along the roads in Holland, you will see this. This soil is nothing but peat moss and sand. Those poor, poor people. The water table is 18 inches below ground. And they managed to grow just about everything there. Siberian irises. Hardy in Kansas. And typically quarter-mile rows of color. Those are lily breeding greenhouses. Every door had a huge padlock on it. They don't trust each other. This is an anemone that needs to be used more. I always mess up the name, so you're going to have to help me find the... Thank you, Sylvestris Elise Feldman. Double-flowered, being double-flowered means the flowers will last 2 to 3 times longer because they're sterile. And this is a spreader. It goes summer dormant. You'll sometimes get flowers again in the fall. So that's one you might add to your list. Delphinium work there. Astounding. They grow great in Oregon. What are you talking about? Oh. Echinaceas. Wow. The selection they have these days. Something else. A word of advice, never buy an echinacea in any container smaller than a gallon. Ask the nurseryman, has this been overwintered? If it has been, you can feel comfortable that it will be back again. They tend to get too pushed, and you end up with a plant that has no reserves to make it through the winter. I can answer more questions about that later. Saw some great Danny van Ichhout, one of the people I visited. This is on the border. He's actually in Belgium, but I threw this in there anyhow. One of his cool hostas. Danny's wife was sick of his hosta obsession. This man smoked, breathed, ate hostas. I mean, insane. She divorced him. And he met a woman at a hosta meeting, and they are madly in love with each other. However, he has his garden, she has hers. And they're all hostas. I don't get it, so that's kind of fun. Kuhn Janssen, one of my buddies, and as you know, I name a lot of plants after food. I don't know why. And Kuhn named a geranium chocolate candy. I said, that's a great name. Where'd you get that idea? And he goes, from you, Dan. He's with a veronicastrum. That's a prairie plant, and very tough. Copper kettle I found in Holland. One of the interspecific, what do they call those? Intersectional, thank you. Beautiful, beautiful flower. Love that color. Saw this amazing phlox there called Uzbek. Fragrant. It looked like blue roses. Every phlox in this nursery was white with mildew. Talk about a mildew problem. This one was spotless. The Dutch now sell it as Laura, but it's a bit different. It's mutated somewhere along the line. It's not as nice a plant as the original. And you get the sorbets, which have odd colors. And this, this is Hans Grahame. I said he looked like he lost his puppy. But Hans he's a really nice nurseryman. He has this unbelievably huge number of perennials at his nursery, and it's open to the public. You can come and buy plants or just drool. That's how he waters everything. So he's great, and he's been working on larger and larger single hellebore flowers. And that's not my dirty hand, but that's good 3 inches across. That's huge. Nice work. Now, Pete Aldolf's a good buddy of mine too over there, and he looks like he's saying, "You take my picture again, I will kill you." But he's done a lot of work in the US and in England. He is probably the #1 in-demand landscape designer in the world. He probably gets millions. And he's the kind of guy that came to his nursery, and there were busloads of rich women coming in to buy plants. And he goes, "Dan, so good to see you, let's run away." And we went to his house, and that's where he had his breeding operation. So he's really into plant breeding. And he's introduced some actias, which used to be called Simicifugas, and the astrantias. Which, do you grow astrantias here? This is astrantia. She grows it. Okay, good. What sort of conditions? What sort of conditions do you grow it in? Dry. Wow, that surprises me. But it's a great cut flower. They last for like 3 weeks in water. And then there's England. Very close to my heart. Been there probably 8 times. I don't go there for a short period. Minimum of 2 weeks, sometimes as long as 3 weeks or a month. And I travel thousands of miles in the car, top to bottom. Love, love, love England. Chelsea Flower Show, nothing like it. That's my new conservatory. And this was just was this just last year? Yeah, and one of our Heucheras used in a vertical wall. Isn't that a cool application? I have 7 minutes. I have a timer on my clock. Saw some very cool alströmerias. Variegated. This would be hardy here. Wonderful campanula. That's called Caroline. Oh, I got those reversed. I apologize. And the Blackmore and Langdon. These are double delphiniums, which I had never seen before. How about a variegated daylily? Anybody grow this one here? Golden zebra? It's an evergreen. Can you grow evergreen daylilies here? Not so well. Marginal. Okay. Russian princess. Super. Look at that color. Purple foliage, magenta flowers. Ranunculus ficaria brazen hussy. You gotta love that name. Rheums. Very cool plants. You're probably too humid to grow these here. Does anybody grow rheum? No. They don't like the heat and humidity. They can take heat, not the humidity. They're stunning. And saw this rhodie there. This is one that can take full sun. It's one of the Heuchemanums. Saw the largest conservatory in the world. That's in Plymouth. It's in an old quarry where they used to collect the clay for all the porcelains. And they just said, well, if you want to develop it, go for it. And they did. And Mount Stewart, this is not far outside of Dublin. Who was it here who had the Mary, Mary, quite contrary? There we go. She has this little locket that said Mary, Mary, quite contrary. This was the garden where that poem was originally written. And they have it embossed in stone. It's kind of cool. Helen Dillon's garden in Dublin. Stunning. This woman is, if you ever get a chance to see her speak, she is something else. She's a firecracker. Everillo, another friend in Ireland, Patrick Fitzgerald, introduced this. Wonderful, that'd be absolutely hardy here. Bright yellow, there's a bright yellow for your garden. Cranby Meridema, cabbage family, edible, but extremely ornamental. Can you grow red jersey here? Yes. She's a good grower. Raise your hand. They have good drainage. Well, red jerseys like it wet. They like clay, yuck soil. So, but beautiful plants, and Mechanopsis, the blue poppies, which are weeds up there. And we have landed in these United States. I have to include us. Mom and apple pie. And just to show you a few plants that we've developed, that we've had a lot of fun with. Agastache, a Juga. This is one called Sparkler. It's only this tall. So the flowers are really low maintenance, nice winter color in the lower right. The Woods Daisies. They are absolutely hardy, like the prairie conditions, but only 8 inches tall. Woods Pink, Woods Purple, Woods Blue. Named by Ed Woods, just down the street from me. Atheriums, who would think of these as ornamental plants? Burgundy lace, Dre's dagger, beautiful spring green. Brunneras, they'll take clay, they take just about anything. But this is the first gold. This is Diane's gold. And King's Ransom, offered by Walter's Gardens. I named this one. I found that one, actually. Campanula Pink Octopus, this is our introduction. Grows in Dallas, Texas. One of the problems with some campanulas is they run. This is a great blue one. And Coreopsis, which we used to think were a little yellow flower. We're changing things. Corydalus, the range and echinacea flowers. Coral Reef, one of ours. Flamethrower, Merlot with the black stems. Strong, that's something we push. Tangerine Dream. Hakone Cloa, the most mispronounced name in horticulture. That's Stripe It Rich. Huge hellebore work being done right now. Look at the way those flowers are held there. Is that something? The daylilies, everybody in the world knows us for the daylilies. Best breeders in the world are here. And the Heucheras, they don't all look alike. Paprika, this is winter color. Paris, non-stop flowers. Highest recommendation from Dan the Man. Spellbound, brand new purple, to die for, holds that color. Heucherellas, which really take the heat and humidity, and new hanging varieties. Walters is doing some really good breeding work right now in hardy hibiscus. They're totally hardy here. They're hardy in Nebraska. I'm waiting for the buckets of drool to come down the aisles from the hosta people. Kniphofia, I'll tell you a bit more about this later if you ask me questions. You saw Gold Roush. That was the beginning. This is our end. This is Goldfinch. Moonshine Pulmonaria, again, compact, no mildew. Scabiosa, sedums, ones that do not fall apart. Beautiful, compact forms. We won 3 awards of garden merit by the Royal Horticultural Society, more than any other company in the world. Very proud of it. Tiarellas, great shade plants. You want drainage, you want compost in your soil. But this is Sugar and Spice, my favorite out of the whole lot. And then we have trailing forms. in the American Trail series. That's Cascade Creeper, Yucca Sapphire Skies. This is absolutely hardy in Zone 5. Now, careful. Denver, Colorado. This is a staple, but that sky blue is to die for. So I want to thank everybody for being my audience. Go out there and do your thing. Let's have the lights. Okay, we are opening the floor for questions. No questions? All right, I'll go home.
You're going to start?
Okay, Dan, where do you want
Hold
to
it close.
go plant honey where you haven't been?
She says, where do I want to go plant hunting where I haven't been? And not the Amazon. I don't like heat and humidity. But in between, and one of the biggest battles between Russia and Japan right now is an island called Sakhalin Island. And it is Zone 4. And there, it's virtually untouched. There is a botanical garden on that realm, and that's where I want to go. So that's the next one. Another question. Oh, come on.
When is open house?
When is what?
When is your open house?
Okay, if everybody will do us the favor on Facebook and go to Terra Nova, just search for Terra Nova, you'll see our logo and become our friend. We will make that announcement. We have plant giveaways, so if you want a free plant, that's where you'll find it. So, and we talk about our new plants as plants are introduced. This is before we even show them in our catalog. They are on this website, on this Facebook site. So please be our friend. If you're looking for our plants, we have a map of the U.S. You click on the map, it'll tell you where you can get the plants in a state and within a city. Okay? Yeah.
I'm from Melbourne, and
Yeah. You had a question?
I'm from Melbourne. I went back recently, but I never saw Shirley's.
Oh, Shirley's is just one part of that, that whole landscape complex. That's just one stand of 35 stands.
Any more questions?
I think they're on the outskirts of Victoria somewhere. Yeah.
I was going to ask from a sustainable point, you breed all these varieties and you introduce them, and I realize some of them fall out of fashion for monetary reasons, but are you doing any steps to make sure that the varieties are preserved, things that you create? And I'm kind of interested, do you do mutation breeding, or is it, or a combination of different things?
Yes. We do a combination, I would say. We do tetraploidy work. We do, we look for sports. I mean, you saw what happened in that Triceratops. If we'll find something that's reproducible, we're going to go for it. The question is, will a cultivar, let's say we introduced a Heuchera 10 years ago, and it's a red one, and we got a new red that is so much better, are we going to keep that around? And the answer is yeah. We actually keep it in tissue culture. We have to, every 6 months, renew that stock. And we keep it alive, and we actually distribute those all over the world, and they're cheaper because they're a bit older product, but they're out there. Okay. Any more questions? Yes.
Since you have so many buddies internationally, which American plants are the people abroad most excited about?
Heuchera. They really are. They're all over England. It's almost embarrassing to go to Chelsea or Hampton Court, and there's just so many in play right now. But it works.
How do you feel about wasting resources on things like lawns, like where you could be doing something that, I mean, being a landscaper.
Oh, actually, yeah. I was a landscaper for 20 years. And you have to use petrochemical resources to fertilize that lawn. Fertilizer does not, well, some parts can come out of the ground, but it takes petroleum to make fertilizer. You fertilize the lawn is beautiful, it grows, you have to mow it, so you have to put gas in that mower to cut it down. You have to haul off the trimmings. If you don't compost, there's complications. I said, as a breeder, we look at what's wrong and what's right with plants. Tons of research being done in turf grasses. One of the companies, about 2.5 miles from our nursery, had a variety of grass that grew at 1/4 the normal growth. It needed 1/4 the fertilizer. It was nearly black-green. Small problem, it had one GMO component. We have a terrorist group in Oregon called the Earth Liberation Front, and they burnt this place to the ground. And so we don't do GMOs at our nursery, in case there's any in the audience. Yeah, but there was a breeding solution. I thought it was astounding, the resources that would have saved. But no, I think you just need to take more and more. Really, if every single person here would just remove most your lawn and put in perennials, I would be so happy. Okay, we're to the blue sheets.
Yes.
Why are you so handsome? I can't believe this. What is best to use to chase off ants and slugs that eat on hosta leaves? Ants eat hosta leaves here? I never heard of that. Nah. Slugs do. The best way to approach slugs, and coming from Oregon and knowing that we have 13-inch banana slugs, which really don't bother hostas, but I had to mention those. The best thing is to have really early control. I am putting slug bait down in January. They are ravenous when they first come out. Those little slugs will do more damage than the big adults any day. And you have to repeat your applications religiously. Once a month, I use the iron phosphate pellets, the Sluggo. Best product on the market. A dog could eat it. I could eat it. But it is toxic to slugs. Sluggo. Dan's mark of approval. Okay.
You just were going to ask about and I'm going to butcher the name, the Niphophia?
Oh, she wants the Kniphofia story. In Melbourne, I call it Niphophia. It looks like a knife, Niphophia. This huge boer man, 6'7", the big bulbous nose, this guy from South Africa with the red veins, you've met him. And he says, puts his huge hand on my shoulder and goes, "Young man, I heard you use the term Niphophia. Indeed, I knew Mr. Kniphoff personally, and it's to be pronounced Kniphofia." And that's absolutely true. If it's named after a person, you use even the regional pronunciation of his name. So it's Forsythia. Sorry, it's Fuchsia. It's not fuchsia. Fuchsia. It's named after Fuchs. Suffer. When a developed variety falls out of fashion, do you throw it out? We've answered that. I feel like Dave Letterman. Or no, that was Leno. Please tell us if any plants repel mosquitoes. Yes. Basil. In my garden, I always have a pot of basil, and I rub it on my skin, back of my neck, on my ears, and it works. I mean, maybe not as good as DEET, but it ain't bad when they're hungry. Do you have mosquitoes in Kansas? Whoo, did I hit a nerve? And yeah, watch your containers, your open containers of water, your watering cans. Just keep them dry between cycles.
I'm not able to read this. Can you read it?
Does Heuchera alum plum royale have villosa genes? Yes, there are some in there. Heuchera villosa is remember that, was it in the first class I showed how Heuchera are only North American plants, from Alaska all through Canada, down to the Gulf of Mexico, into Mexico. And this amazing range. Along the Gulf grows this native species called villosa. Anytime that's in the blood, or you see that in the copy, in the written description, you're going to have some assurance that that plant's going to take heat and humidity. And the Heucherellas do very, very well in heat and humidity.
Now, when you list your Heuchera, do you list which ones have villosa genes in them?
If you come to our website, you will actually have all that information. You'll see a V by the name. You're safe with those. And you can call Leica really anytime, 2 o'clock in the morning. She doesn't mind. Please do that. I have her personal number. I'll be happy to share it. No, I'll put it up on the computer.
Okay, 2 more questions. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
She tries so hard to keep decorum. What can be done to get rid of whiteflies on hibiscus? Get rid of the hibiscus. There's certain plants in the greenhouse we call indicator plants. And this is a real thing that we will, if I have a greenhouse and I say, God, I maybe saw a whitefly the other day and I'm not sure I have it, I'll go buy a hibiscus and we will put it in there and they will find it. They're really bad. You need to, I usually like to hit them with systemics. There's a commercial product called Marathon that's fairly effective. This is a pesticide that actually goes through the roots. You've used it on your roses to kill aphids, but it goes on the roots, goes through the sap system, and it'll help to keep them away. But whiteflies are nasty. They're covered, the reason they're white is they're covered with a waxy coating, and they literally repel any pesticide you put on them. So this is why sometimes you use alcohol. Mealybugs are another one that are probably the hardest creature in the greenhouse to get rid of, are mealybugs. I have a friend who runs all the greenhouses at Kew, Carlos Magdalena, and the place was thick with them. I mean, he says, I'm at wit's end. I cannot control these. He tried them biological controls. It doesn't work. So you do your best. But alcohol, just rubbing alcohol, you can spray it on them, dab them. Okay, one last one. I have rose midge as a parasite. I'm glad you have a pair of them. How do I get rid of it? It attacks all buds. I have very few blooms on my 20 knockout bushes. And he signed his name. Nobody's ever done this before. John Turner, where are you? Thank you, John. I don't live here. Is there a rose grower in the group who can help me out? Okay. Say it again. Okay, so using again, we were talking about a systemic rose food would have that in.
Yeah, you also want to spray the tops at the same time and put it all around the roots because the midges drop down into the soil. Use that pit and life cycle.
Okay, so you want to interrupt that life cycle. Very good. Okay, did everybody hear that? That you do want to spray the tops and the soil because they will fall down and start that cycle again. And with that, we have one more desperate question.
Have you come across red baptisia?
Red.
Possible. I read a paper from the 30s.
I have seen orange. I've seen orange about the color of her sweater, and that's as close.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, he was asking if have I ever seen a red baptisia? Richard Darkey is a guy to talk to at the Chicago Botanic Garden, and he's breeding those currently. So ask him. He'll be the first one out with it.
Okay, so Dan, thank you for being with us today and this evening. Thank you much. Big round of applause.